الو السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
دكتورة رشا, are you there? Sarah, are you moderating or Russia? I contacted Russia. Is she in yet?
يا عم ارحمنا بقى من ام الفول بتاعك.
مين يا عم ارحمنا ده؟
That's okay. That's a good part. That's okay. You can do it, but
Good morning, everyone. Can you please mute yourself?
Just a minute. I will mute all. Then you can start. Okay. Russia, unmute yourself and you can start. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you among us today. Today is the first session in the Research Faculty Development Program conducted by Dubai Medical College for Girls. The first session will be titled The Principle of Research Planning, which will include all the basic information that we need to know before conducting any research or writing a research proposal. Our speaker today is Dr. Abdel Menam Al-Mardi. He's a graduate of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Khartoum in 1979, and he finished his PhD in anatomy from London University in 1987. He holds the certificates in health professional education in 2004, and he worked in the University of Khartoum in Nilan University in the medical education department as a medical education consultant. Also, he worked in the National Rabat University and the University of Science and Technology as being the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine. He also worked in the Nile University as a coordinator of Medical Information System Program. He worked also in Sultan Qaboos University and Imam Mohammed bin Saud University, Marifa University, and currently he's with us in Dubai Medical College for Girls as the chair of the Biomedical Science Department and acting head of the Medical Education Unit. He worked in many places as a trainer in health profession education and academic leadership, educational technology, research, evidence-based practice, and knowledge translation. We welcome Dr. Abdel Menam Al-Mardi today among all of us, and we're ready to enjoy a useful session, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasha, and welcome all. And because today's session is an important one, it's a foundation for the coming sessions. We will try not to waste any time. So I will start straight away by sharing my screen and starting my PowerPoint presentation. And in my PowerPoint presentation, I will start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And then I will start with an advice before I set the agenda for today's session. My advice is I want you all to be critical, not skeptical and nihilistic. Be open-minded, because what we are going to discuss today and in the coming sessions as any part of science is still evolving. There are differences between points of view. There are differences in terminologies. So just keep an open mind. What I want you to do during today's session and the next or the coming sessions is to be open-minded. Yes, we want you to be critical. Don't take my word for it. Think about it, explore, and rethink. This is my advice. The sessions are going in this session, today's session. It's divided into 4 parts. In the program, you receive with equal timing. But as you will notice when we start, some part will take more than planned for them, and some part will take less. So we will adjust. The total number of the time for this session is about 2 hours. In the beginning, I will start by introducing research. I'm going to give an introduction to research. It might take some time. It's a foundation. And then we will start in the first one, we will just address issues and principles, general principles. And then we will finish with addressing, highlighting the steps of research. And the first step of research is planning. So we will discuss planning today. And for planning, there are 2 aspects. We will discuss each of them in a session, in a separate small session during today's workshop. The first one is decisions that we need to make during the planning stage, and then the preparations that we need to make during the planning session. The first part in the introduction, I want to ask you before I comment. And as you know, you can press down the space bar and speak and just lift your fingers, and the muting will come on again. So you don't need to unmute, because if you unmute, you will forget to mute again. So if you want to talk, just press and hold down the space bar, say what you want to say, then raise your fingers from the space bar, the muting will come again. So what I'm going to start with for the introduction, I'm going to cover, this is just an introduction, the types of research, the driving forces, and the sources of ideas for research, for studies. So I will start by asking, and now the variations and differences in the use of terminologies will arise. So I want to ask you, anybody would like to tell us about the types of research? And then the last one, of course, we will divide the phases and steps of research into the phases. So now I want someone to tell us about what are the types of health research. Yes, we'll give you half a minute to start talking, and then we will give the whole thing 1 or 1.5 minutes. What are the types of health research? Research in health. How do we categorize? How do we classify? Anybody? What are the types of research? Okay, they have an hour, a half minute have passed. Nobody is interacting. I'm going to say them.
Doctor,
Yes, please.
Case study?
These are the study designs, not okay.
Not the
We
types,
can-
okay.
We can say we have quantitative and qualitative research. This is one aspect.
This is also types of designs.
Behavioral studies,
Huh?
behavioral studies, or public health research, is it?
Yes, this is part of a category, in health.
And analytical.
This is type of a study design. It's good. This is very good, because now we can differentiate between types of research and types of study design, because we are going to give a lot of time to study design. But if I describe one category and I want you to give it a name, it's health research. If I am studying the biology and the biophysiology and the pathophysiology and the effect of drugs on humans.
Or
What?
embryology, developmental or embryology.
If I am studying embryology, yes, the embryology, the biology, the physiology, I'm studying issues related to the human body, the effect of the environment in the human body, the effect of medicines on the human body, the effect of behavioral aspects on the human body. What do you call this category? And what about if I am studying the population?
Can I
What?
share, Dr. At the minute? Can, if you ask. This is Dr. Sahar. Maybe this is the basic type of research or biomedical science research, basic type of research, maybe. You can correct for me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You are absolutely right. What I described now is called biomedical research, which is in itself is two types, basic and applied. Basic biomedical research and applied biomedical research. What about if I am studying the population to determine the parameters of the population, the characteristics of the population?
Epidemiological studies.
Yes, and the other name is population research. Population research. And the third type, if I'm addressing issues related to policy, to system, to quality, to management, all of that is called health policy research. So we have three types in health: biomedical, population, and health policy research. These are the types of health research. Okay, the second important question. The second question, what are the driving forces? What makes people do research? Why do people do research?
Depends on the interest of the people, maybe scientific interest, or sometimes the driving force in the work itself as the promotion issues, and most of the people are searching for this point especially, and it may be also part of the job as a society requirement or a study done for to solve a certain problem in the society. So I think these are our problem facing the society.
But the first three are the driving forces, true driving forces. The last one is part of one of the three driving forces. I'm not going to say what, but let us first list. What you mentioned is absolutely right. The first one is curiosity, interest, curiosity. If you remember, people just go and explore things just because of curiosity, just because of it. The most important research conducted by Mendel is he was exploring, he was looking at the plants through his window and all of that. So curiosity is one of the driving forces. And in the past, it was the main driving force, the main driving force. But you also mentioned obligation, compliance. You have to do it. It's a job and a requirement. So it's an obligation for the purpose of compliance. And the third one you said is for promotion and all of that. So benefit, whether it is part of your promotion criteria or you are gaining money through it and all of that. So the last one is part of one of the three. To solve a problem or whatever could be because of obligation or because of you are expecting a benefit. So these are three. What about opportunity? You are in a place and suddenly an organization or an institution visit you and they say, we have this type of research and we want you to participate. So it's an opportunity that comes to you, it's a driving force. So these are the main driving forces that drive people to conduct research. Very important to know the difference between these. Now, the last, where do research ideas come from? We ask it at the beginning, but it will be more important when we start discussing selecting a topic. But where do research ideas come from? Nagila in her survey, in her interaction, mentioned one of the driving, one of the sources of research.
Yes, the community, as I told you, maybe data collected from the community to study certain problem related to the population, as you said, and sometimes it's also through navigation of the for answering certain question, as you told us that there is curiosity. So from your specialty, you are going to navigate and search for answering of this question. And if you don't find the proper answer or the complete answer, you start to search yourself.
You mentioned two different things, Nagila.
Yes.
First one, you said in the community, blah, 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 in the community.
The community is important because it is something, sometimes they need to have it. And sometimes it's required to solve a certain problem.
I
Yes.
won't give it a name. Just a minute.
Yes, yes. Rephrase it in a proper terminology.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If it is based, if it is a community, there are two types of sources for ideas in the community. If you know something about the community, that might be a trigger for an idea. And if you observe something about the community, this is another type of source.
Yes.
So the first one is called information, while the second one is called observation. So sources of ideas include information, whether information you already know, you search for it, or somebody else tell you about it. It's information. It will give you a research idea if you know about it. But if you observe something, it could be a problem, it could be a question, and it could be a phenomenon. So to answer a question, solve a problem, or explain a phenomenon, all of these are called observations. These are observed. These are two sources. The last, not important, it was more important in the past, together with curiosity, is ideation. People, intellectual people, while sitting managing their own business, just an idea comes to their mind. So there are three types of sources of research ideas. One of them is observation. While you are in the workplace, you observe something, or somebody else observes something, you start discussing it, then a research idea comes along. Or information. By the way, information can be your own information collected during your daily work, or information conveyed to you by somebody else, or information you seek. You go into the internet, you talk to people, asking about a few things, you collect information, then you get a research idea from the information. So information is the second source of research ideas. It can be intention. I think about, I have a research area, and I am going to explore. I will become more informed about the research area. I identify gap in the research area. Then I will identify a topic. Then I will select a topic for my research. So information is a very important source, but observation is also another source. Ideation is the third source of research ideas, but it was very important in the past. Now, people do not think much. They depend on observation and information. But these are the three sources.
Dr. Alimena, can I ask a question? If we take a research idea from a recommendation, for example, of another research,
yes.
Like for example, we need more research in this area, or like this. Under which category you put this?
Think about it. Is this an observation? No, it is not an observation. I didn't observe a problem, a question, or a phenomenon. But I read a paper, and in that paper, I read about all of what they did and what did they find, what do they think about it, and then they say more research is needed in this area. This is
Dr. Abdelmenem, do you agree with me in the basic medical research that we have actually the source of ideas is sometimes a mixed form of this? We sometimes have the information or certain observation and we think about it, and then we start to add our question for the research. So I think there is no sharp cut between them in our type of research. Yes. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. But this is a major classification. Ideas can be observations, can be based on information, your information, other people's information, our information, published information, or just an idea. And this is called ideation.
So it's an information. Recommendation coming from a research, it's under information, right?
Yes, right. Okay. the most important in the introductory part of this session. What are the steps or the phases of research? Because this will actually make the outline and the skeleton of our program. Although people address this issue differently, but the most widely accepted phasing or phases or steps of research are now well known. They are based on the context of research, the steps of actually going along doing research. So how do we describe the steps or the phases of research? Anybody?
Yes, of course. First of all, you have the questions to search. This is, I think, the most difficult part of any research is to have the proper question to answer. This is the base of everything you are going to do later.
Yeah, but this is part of a step. This is part.
But I don't know. This may be the trigger, doctor. So you have first to have something in your mind that you want to answer or to search for. Yeah, I don't know. You should correct me, of course. This how I think, and then we're going to collect all the tools and the data and information related to answering this question and the work done before or under processing now related to this issue. Then after collection of all the information, you start to design your study and to select the proper type that suits your work. And then you start to plan the protocol or the proposal, and to plan after collection of the introductory part and the information, you are going to add the different methodologies that you are going to follow. And then you write the proposal and declare what you exactly want. Then you start in the process of execution of the work.
I'll stop you here.
Yes.
All you mentioned before execution, what do we call this phase? What are you doing?
Preparatory phase or what?
Preparatory phase is called planning for research. This is the first step. What you need to do is to plan for your research.
Yes, and study the needed requirements at all tools I need. Yani financial and yes, and available instruments, everything. Yes.
This is the first step. Now the second step is
execution of the research. I start the practical part. If it is practical, according to the type, depends on the type. Some maybe collection of data in some types of research, epidemiological researches and population-based research. You are going to make the survey and collect and the questionnaires, and you collect the opinion. And in case of the experimental work, you are going to purchase your tools and prepare your lab and start the experimental animal or human work. You collected the samples, whatever, according to the type of you started to do the work itself.
So the second
this is the second phase.
Conduction of research. Okay, thank you. What is the third step?
The third phase is also a very critical phase, because you are going to analyze the findings of your research and start the statistical analysis, and to think about the application, the point of shortage, the recommendation, and start to present this analysis and result in a written papers or scientific papers. And
just 1 minute, Najla, just 1 minute. You now mentioned the first step, which is analysis. This is analysis and management of the data. Then the writing of the report. 4 stages. Thank you very much.
Then publication. Publication is also a very hard step, doctor. At the end, this is the time-consuming one of all of these.
Reporting is writing and publishing. Reporting is writing, publishing, and disseminating. This is called reporting. So in the reason, we have 4 steps of research. You need to plan for research. You need to conduct the research. You need to analyze the data you collected, and then you need to report. The planning ends with a research proposal. Conduction ends with data. Analysis ends with results. Reporting ends with a published and disseminated report. Then we have 4 steps. Now, we are going to address the first step, which is planning, in this session, together with the next session, which is proposal writing. The conduction and analysis will be the 3rd session, and the last session is about reporting, which addresses writing, publishing, and disseminating your report. Okay, 4 steps of report. Now, when you look around, people put the steps differently. Some detail. If we go through this process steps, identifying the problem, evaluating the literature, creating hypothesis, research design, describe population, all of these 5 are planning. Then data collection, conduction, and then data collection, of course. As Prof. Nagla mentioned, you might have an experiment, or you might have a clinical trial, or you might have a survey. So what do? You just intervene if there is intervention. If there is no intervention, you collect the data. Or you intervene, then you collect, or you experiment, then you collect, or you go straight ahead and collect, if it is just an observational step. So data collection is the 3rd step, which is conduction and data collection. Then data analysis is the 3rd step. This is the 2nd. This is the 3rd. And report writing is the last step. So even in Question Pro, which is an excellent site, they are classifying research process steps different. This is why I started by saying, keep an open mind. If I say anything, think about it, critique it in your mind, read about it, explore it, rethink again. You get your own perspective by this methodology. But the most widely accepted classification now is, or the steps are a planning step, a conduction step, data collection, an analysis step, and a reporting step. Also, if you look at this, also 9 research process, and they call identifying the problem, reviewing the literature, setting research question, objective, choosing the study design, deciding on the sample design. Then all these 5 are planning. Then you collect data, process and analyze data, and write the report. So everybody is actually mentioning the details of the planning as separate steps, but they are not.
Dr. Abdelmenaim, can I ask a question about writing the report in the planning phase of the research? Which report?
Just a minute. Writing the report is a step. It is not in the planning step. The planning is the 3rd step. Conduction. 3rd step is processing and analyzing data. And the last step is reporting, not report writing. Reporting includes three aspects: the actual writing of the report, publishing your report, and disseminating. Sometimes people say publishing and disseminating are the same, but okay. Sometimes you publish, then you disseminate using your
ResearchGate, maybe.
Yes. Thank you very much. ResearchGate, Google Scholar, this is dissemination.
Yes.
So this excellent research process diagram is representing all phases of research, right? All phases.
ما شغالين الآن شغالين في الأكتيفيتي. لا activity distant learning, virtual, بزوم. link نرسلها لك الآن no problem. Sarah or Sarah or Rasha, can you send Prof. Yusuf the link, please? Okay, I was talking. Sorry for that. This was the deal. What were you saying?
Doctor, I was saying that this excellent diagram is representing all the phases of research process, not only one phase, right?
Yes, but the planning part is detailed.
Yeah.
Identifying the problem.
Yes. Yes.
Using the study design, deciding on the sample design. These are the planning steps. Collecting the data is actually the conduction step. Processing and analyzing data is actually
Analyze. Yeah.
the writing of the report is the last one.
Yes.
Okay. This one is also it's an infograph. Choose a topic, review the literature, formulate the problem, develop the research question, choose organize the research design, gather data, analyze. Gather data is the second step. Analyze the data and interpret the data are the second step. And then communicate the finding is part of the reporting. Why am I showing you these different infographics? Because everybody is putting it in. Look at people from market research. They say problem definition, approach formulation, research design selection, then data collection, data processing, analysis, and reporting.
But all of them, Doctor, all the designs you showed us are the same in giving more details
About
to the planning, because it is the most important, actually.
why we have the whole day
The
to
main guarantee of success of the work is the planning, the good planning.
this is why we gave it 2 sessions. 2 sessions.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Now, this is the research process. Step 1, define the topic. Step 2, narrow the topic. So as you can see, even the planning stage is addressed differently. And sometimes not quite precisely. For example, this step 8, they say write the paper. So not reporting, write the paper, I wrote the paper. They don't talk about publishing it or disseminating. And therefore, the 4 steps is, this is another one. I'm adding all of that because we are going to share with you this PowerPoint presentation later. So you can actually, this is the first half an hour of our session. And if you have any questions regarding, this is the introduction, just the introduction. If you have questions, you can ask now before you move to the second part of today's session. Okay, I think the discussion was done during presentation, so I will move straight to
Dr. Mariam is raising her hand.
Yes, Mariam, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Professor, actually, in pathology department, we have a similar kind of flow for the research program. What we have decided that, after planning, there will be a phase of just review, and we will stimulate the students to give a review article. And then after the research, we'll ask them to submit an original article. So is this feasible, or is this too much work? Should we I just want your insight on this.
Called intermediate reporting. Our progress reporting. Intermediate reporting or progress reporting. Because I want, and it is done. It is usually done, even in institutions where you are doing a postgraduate degree. When you finish the first step, the planning step, you come and present your proposal, and they discuss it with you, and they need to approve it. Also, people who offer grants need from you a presentation as if you are reporting the first step, the planning step. Yes, it's okay, no problem with that. It's an intermediate or a progress report. This is not the reporting of the research. The reporting of the research is right at the end, right at the end. Okay. Second part, first part finished. The second part is the planning. We go into the details of the planning. I knew you are very passionate, very enthusiastic. You will keep discussing and things related to the planning. It's a huge. But if we are not focused, it will need a whole day. This part of the planning, this is the first part. Just introducing what we mean by planning for research. So when you plan for research, you have 2 things to do. You have to make decisions, to take some decisions, and you have to make some preparation. You have to take some decision and make some preparation. When you make the decisions, what sort of decisions? You already mentioned them, but we need to discuss them a little. Of course, you need to select a topic and decide on a question and objectives. Then you select a suitable study design. You need to decide at this point in time, during the planning stage, when you finish with the first step, which is topic selection, the research question, the research hypothesis, the aim, the objectives, all of that, you finish deciding. I said, I'm going to do this. This is the topic. This is the research question. Now, what is a suitable study design? You need to select the most appropriate for your research question. So you need to know background. You need background knowledge about the different study designs. Then what about the population? Based on your study design, you decide, you make decisions related to the population. What sort of population? How am I going to recruit the population? How am I going to take a sample? How am I going to take a sample? And what sort of sample size? You make decisions regarding this part. Then you decide on what sort of variables you are going to use, what sort of data you are going to collect, and how are you going to manage, what are the data analysis approaches you are going to use, depending, you see. So depending on the question, you select a study design. Depending on the study design, you make decisions regarding the population and sample. Depending on decisions related to population and sampling, you decide on what sort of variables, data analysis approaches, etc. And then you select which data collection tool and methods are most appropriate for your research. You need to decide on those 5 issues. And they are, as you can see, sequential. Sequential, you need to make the first decision, then you make the second decision, and then you make the third decision, and so on. 5 decisions you need to take. We're going to shed more light about each of them. If we go into the area of identifying the topic, it might take a whole day. How do you do that? Blah, blah, blah. We're just going to introduce just highlights on what it means to select to identify the topic. Usually, you will start with an idea. Remember, the idea comes from an observation, information, or ideation. There is an issue I need to address. So you have an idea. Now you go and explore the idea. This is called the preliminary search, and it is also called the scoping. You need to scope. Is this idea research worthy? Is it research worthy? And what is the scope of this research idea? So scoping has got 2 meanings. Is it research worthy? What I mean by that, is this topic already covered satisfactorily? So you do the scoping, and for preliminary research and the scoping, there are methodologies. If we go into them, then we will take a lot of time. But this is what you need to do. You have an idea, you explore it through preliminary research and scoping. Then, if you have more than one research idea, then you can prioritize using a prioritization process. And also, if we go into that, it's going to take a lot. How do you do a prioritization? So you prioritize and you select your topic. Then you convert your research topic into a research question. And for the purpose of statistics, you generate a hypothesis for that. And people already know the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis, the H0 and the H1. This is essential for the analysis phase. So you need to say, I want to study whether students in Dubai Medical College are helped to develop resilience. Are they helped to develop resilience? So the question is, are students in Dubai Medical College helped to develop resilience, whether through curricular or extracurricular activities? This is a research question. What is the hypothesis? The null hypothesis? No. No, they are not. We expect to look at the curriculum, we don't find anything. We expect to look at extracurricular activities, we don't find anything. This is the null hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis, yes, they are. So you convert your idea into a research question, you make a hypothesis for that, then you say, what I'm going to see whether there are such activities in the curriculum that help students gain resilience, and to what extent, and then who is doing it. So I can specify some objectives and what is the reason of absence if they are not there. So I identify a number of objectives. I formulate the research object. This is the next step in related to the topic. Okay, this is in relation to the topic. Then I say, this is my topic. This is my research question, and this is my objectives. These are my objectives, and related to the question, this is my hypothesis. The hypothesis is you don't need to spend time on it. If your question, the answer to your question is yes, this is the alternative hypothesis. If the answer to your question is no, this is the null hypothesis. Then you select the appropriate study design that is suitable for your topic, the topic you already select. Now, what are now? Do I have no? Yes. Now it is a chance for you to interact. How do we categorize study designs? This is just a brainstorm.
We can
analytic.
Again?
Descriptive and analytic.
Descriptive and analytic.
I think we'll call it qualitative or quantitative. That would be, I think,
Dr. Abdelmanem, we can classify study designs into observational study design and intervention. So if we just observe something, it's called observation without any intervention. And if we need to intervene, whether this intervention could be like a clinical trial or community or like this, it will be intervention.
Okay. Okay. We need more. We need more. All what was said is right. Huh?
I think the guide for each of us in the study design is variable according to the scope of the work and the specialty. So in the people working in lab field like us, it's mainly descriptive design, and we choose case control or experimental or human study.
We are not now selecting.
Yes, you are categorizing. Categorizing, yes. So yes, of course there is, as my colleague mentioned, but you are going to put it in the proper way, that it is either descriptive one, or a quantitative or qualitative, and under each one of them we have other subdivisions.
We just want the categories now. We just want the categories.
I think it may be qualitative or quantitative. This is
this is one way. Again,
the main issue. And then
observational intervention.
Yes, it's another category.
Under observational, we can say, as Dr. Shifan, descriptive and analytical.
Yes, we are not going into the subcategories now.
Okay, okay.
To list this versus this. Is it observational or experimental?
It could be prospective, retrospective.
It can be prospective or retrospective.
Yes.
And it can be cross-sectional or longitudinal.
Yes.
So studies can be qualitative or quantitative. I have my own reservations on this classification. I reserve the right to be critical. I reserve my right to be critical. It is widely used, this classification, but when you come to describe your study design, you usually do not use whether it is quantitative or qualitative. What you use, whether it is cross-sectional or longitudinal, whether it is prospective or retrospective, whether it is observational or experimental. It is unusual. This is used in discussion. This is used when you come to data. It's a qualitative study, it's a quantitative study. It's confusing. It applies more to data, better to data. But as you know, they classify scientific research, all of the scientific research, into quantitative. Although, when we come to describe our scientific research, we also categorize it into quantitative and qualitative. So, phenomenology studies, social studies, studying phenomena, studying ethics, studying social aspects, they call it qualitative. And when you deal with scientific issues, it is quantitative. It is not quite convincing. I, myself, Abdul Munaim al-Mardi, deserve the right to question this categorization. But I accept totally they can be cross-sectional or longitudinal. Let us discuss this. What do we mean when we say this is a cross-sectional study?
That it is applied in the current time, available data, current time. You don't search for previous, and you are not going to follow a future data or future events, just the observation right now.
Observation right now, data collected right now, or at a specific point in time. Data collected.
Yes, at the time you collected the data from. Yes, you may have a data limited to certain time. So between certain time point, and you analyze it.
If I collect data today, Sunday, but I collected data in the morning, in the afternoon,
so it is longitudinal. You compare the time factor.
No, this is the same cross-sectional.
You know, لا بس في حاجة يا جماعة. لا ثواني طيب. For example, مثلا in diabetes, we have many samples.
Not an argument. We are not.
Yes, true. I understand. But I take your opinion. Yani, if I have it in different time, I didn't specify the time gap. And this time gap, the doctor makes a difference in the reading. So when I compare an analysis, I compare this timing. يعني مثلا الفاستنج جلوكوز غير البوست برانديال غير بعد 1 hour glucose is different from that one. And this is I don't know. يعني you can judge. I don't know. But I think if there is time factor, it is longitudinal.
Professor Abdul, I think, you know, in like if multiple readings are taken over time and yes. Professor Najla said, like post-parental or something like hourly, if we have described this in the methodology, this will be a cross-sectional itself. That this
in the lab, we have in the enzymology, doctor, sometimes we make the reaction. We can study the reaction in certain point only by the product and the difference between the reactant and the product. Okay, and sometimes we measure it by kinetic. We consider the time factor. Each 1 minute we have a reading. So the gap is 1 minute, but still it's considered the time. So
can we?
Yes.
Just one comment. Can we don't go specifically for things? Because this sectional study, it will not go for biochemistry when you are testing in different level. So you can use another method other than the cross-sectional.
Only not specific,
because not every study design is suitable for some situations. So it depends on what we are going to study.
And categorizing, but we are explaining the term. Now let us finish with cross-sectional. Mariam and Najla said 2 points that describe cross-sectional study. The first point, it is the data is collected once, as Mariam said, at a certain point in time. This is cross-section. The data is collected once in a certain point in time. The data might have been collected 2 years ago, still, if it was collected at a certain point in time and collected once, it's a cross-sectional study. If it is collected, as Mariam said, multiple times, then it's a longitudinal study. This is how we type. Very important, what type of cross-sectional studies do you know of? because we want to take this out of our way so that we continue. What type of cross-sectional studies you know of?
Prevalence studies, prevalence of a disease.
Prevalence,
Case control study.
case control study, is case control study.
Maybe it can be this or that.
Because case control study, I can collect data from different sources at different points in time, so it doesn't apply.
Case control
Sometimes
study
I may have.
case control study is a retrospective study. It's not cross-sectional.
Huh?
It's another
retrospective
case.
يا دكتور سحر.
دكتور سعد دقيقة.
طب سؤال my question is طيب if it is only in one point of time يا جماعة, is it considered a cross sectional?
Yes.
I have group of patients and I take one data for at one time. I compare the control and the case.
You can do it now. You can do it tomorrow. You can do it in the past. But what you do, you collect data from a certain point in time and the data only once. Whether it is from the records or whether it is now or whether it is tomorrow.
Yes. But only one point.
Certain point in time, and you collect the data only once, then the cross-sectional study. Let me give you examples and let us get this out of our way. You know the census. The census.
Yes.
التعداد data is collected from the population at a certain point in time. This certain point in time might be a month. But when you collect the data from a sample, an item, you collect it only once. So the certain point in time is a whole month, but the data is collected only once. This is a cross-sectional survey. But if I collect data, I go into the classroom and then I select a sample from the classroom, and I want to know the difference between living in Dubai and psychological problems. I don't know. I just selected the sample. When I take one of the students and ask them a few questions, where do you live? And then I subject them to an inventory to detect psychological issues. I am unaware of either the risk factor nor the outcome. Then this is a cross-sectional observational study. Now, the term is now reserved for cross-sectional observational studies rather than cross-sectional surveys. Surveys are just called surveys. So when you classify observational analytic studies, we will say cross-sectional, blah, 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 blah. We will come to that when we come to classifying observational studies. But there, we need to finish this. Studies can be cross-sectional or longitudinal. You already mentioned they can be prospective or retrospective, and we all know about that. If we collect data going backwards, then it is a retrospective. If we start collecting data now and move forward, then it's a prospective study. Now, based on research influence, this is what Dr. Sahar mentioned earlier. If the researcher, not the researcher, if the researcher influences the events, it is classified into observational and experimental. Brackets, intervention. What is the difference, by the way, between experimental and brackets, intervention? Experimental is a general term, including laboratory experiments and field experiments and clinical experimentation. Clinical, field, and laboratory. All of that is experimental.
The sample or the subject will be subjected to collection of certain material, and it will be or the animal or whatever will be put in certain circumstances, and you notice the change in behavior or the change in readings according to the experiment. But observational, it is something happening outside the lab, and you just collect the data and analyze it. Maybe maybe also in the clinic, or it is happening without your intervention.
No, this is absolutely not right. Experimental include three. One of them is in the lab, you are experimenting. One of them in the field, you are also experimenting, maybe intervening. And in the clinical, you are also intervening. If you are not intervening, then it is not an experimental study, it's an observational study. You have to intervene to call it interventional. So we have experimental. If human subjects are involved, whether in the field or in the clinics, it is called interventional. It's called intervention because you are intervening in the events, and then you are affecting.
Giving a treatment or something.
Giving a treatment, for example, or giving training, or introducing a new software. You are intervening in the process, then this is interventional. Why are you doing this? Well, I am conducting an experiment to see the effect of this intervention. So experimental is an umbrella terminology, while interventional when it applies to human subjects. Okay.
Dr. Abdelmonem, can I interfere? You know, we have attended a course actually a couple of years back from the DHA staff, and that's what called Soprigo, or maybe I'm not pronouncing it properly. And he divided the studies. Oh, they were calling Soprigo Cafe Online. Actually, from the DHA, they brought up him, and he gave many times these courses. And he divided the courses. I will read it for you. I mean, the studies.
Okay.
Because the definition or the terms used is a little bit confusing for us now.
Okay.
And he mentioned the types of studies, like three main types: observational descriptive, observational analytical study, and experimental studies, where it's mentioned that intervention is made by the researcher. Under observational descriptive studies, he put around 4 things like surveys.
We are going into that.
Studies, case report, case series. Yeah, but now we are confused actually a little bit. Yani, we would like to have one stream, because now you divided it to cross-sectional, and then they said qualitative and quantitative, and then longitudinal, and that. So it's a lot of terms.
For you, this slide again. The first one, I want you to forget about it because I put this red question mark. Alas, lakin still, you can describe your study as being cross-sectional or longitudinal. You can also describe it as being prospective or retrospective. But the most widely used classification is classifying them based on whether the researcher is influencing the event. If you are...
We have 4 systems of categorization, Doctor. Yeah, several systems of categorization is there. As you mentioned here, there are 4 systems.
Yes.
And we can put all the studies under any of them.
But this is what you can do. As Prof. Badriya mentioned, you can go for the third one. You can go for describing your research as being observational or experiment. Brackets, intervention. You can do that. But you can say this study is a cross-sectional, retrospective, observational study. You can use all 3 if you like. If you don't like, you can just say this is an observational study or this is an experimental study. If you want to be more specific, you will say this is an interventional study, because you are intervening in the biology of humans, the sociology of humans. You are intervening and you are measuring the result of your intervention. So it can be experimental / interventional, or just observational, or if you are not influencing the events. That is needed. We cannot say prospective or retrospective. People are saying that it's a type of classification, it exists.
Dr. Abdelmenem, yeah.
They are there and they are accepted.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I tell something? For no confusion, I can tell one thing. Take the last one, which is observational and experimental or intervention. Under this, you can just, Dr. Abdelmenem, can I just something? I will finish within less than 1 minute. When you are talking about retrospective and prospective, this is which kind of research? This is also observational. So it depends, as Dr. Abdelmenem said, it depends on how you are understanding the design of your study. So nothing interference, Dr. Badriya, all are the same. Qualitative study design is very important, but this is another issue, another big issue related, as Dr. Abdelmenem said, to sociology, which is very important also in public health, but it's not our topic now, not our project. Thank you, Dr. Abdelmenem.
Thank you very much, Sahar. We cannot cover everything. We are just giving an outline. Now, خلاص نحن متفقين إنه we need to shed more light on observational and experimental studies. People were very enthusiastic. They wanted to finish with that. Now their chance is there. I will just flash the type and I want them to describe briefly, please, because we have a lot to cover. Observational studies, they can be descriptive or comparative, brackets, analytic. Yalla, tell me, what is this? What is the difference? When do you say this is descriptive and this is analytic, or this is comparative?
So I'll just sum it up with an example. Descriptive would be like the performance of year 2 MBBCH student in pathology, and analytical or comparative would be the comparing the performance of Emirati and non-Emirati students in year 2 in pathology.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Yes, exactly. If you are studying one group, it is descriptive. Or if you are comparing between 2 or more, it is comparative or analytic. Okay? One group or one issue or one item or one element or one subject, it is descriptive. If you are comparing, then it is comparative or analytic. What are the types? I will just flash the types and you tell me about them. I want these 4 types. There are something called course report, case report. قلت course report طبعا من الجنة. Case reports or studies, case series, and surveys. These are descriptive. Can you explain? Anybody?
Case report, when you are dealing only with one new case or observation only, you want to register or record one unusual. This is case report. If it is like more than one, we are going.
What about the studies? Brackets, and I put.
I don't know this. I know only what we call case report. Report only. It's only one case. You are going, doctor, to tell us about this. This is case report. Case series, when we have also unusual new case, like at the start of COVID-19, the first one case was case report. Other new cases, 5, 6 become 10, unusual new case series. This is what I know.
Yes, thank you very much. What about case studies, so that we can extrapolate on what you said? You said case reports when an unusual event encounters you during your daily work and you want to report that because unusual. This was not mentioned before. Also, by the way, HIV was discovered through a case report. So many issues were discovered through case report. And case studies, case report is you are doing your day-to-day business, managing your own business, then you encounter an unusual thing. And then you report it. But if you select something and go intentionally study it, I want to study what happens in this thing. And I study it and then I report it. It's called case studies. And case studies are more used in business, in the marketing, in all of that, but they are also used in health, and they're called cases. If you intentionally go and study something. If you want to follow up the development of cancer, you want to see how it develops. So you follow this. This is a case study because you are following something to describe it, to describe how it progresses. So it's a case study. If you are working in the clinical setting and you encounter something unusual and you report it, this is a case report. If you collect a number of case reports or a number of case studies in the same issue and then report this is then a case series. And as Sahar mentioned, like the HIV, like COVID, many actual diseases were discovered through case reports. While surveys, you go and study the parameters of a particular group or item.
Dr. Abdelmanem, please, regarding surveys, it can be directed to several groups and compared. Yani it can be comparative as well.
If it's a comparative, it's not a survey. It is not a descriptive.
Sometimes you make مثلا survey for certain phenomena in different colleges and compare between them. So yes, between the finding in different colleges or different cohorts. So is it a comparative?
Yeah, it's comparative. It's a comparative. If you compare, it's a comparative. If you just survey.
Because study, I had something like this. I have a study like this regarding the attitude. It was between different colleges and the same college between different programs, the post and the undergraduate. I had a study like this in the University of Sharjah, and we had a survey directed to different cohorts, and we compared between them. So that's why I asked you. I consider this a comparative in this case, Doctor.
You don't consider it. It is comparative.
It is comparative. Yes. Yes, through survey. This is what I am telling you.
No. We are coming to the third survey.
Okay.
Coming to the third survey. We will discuss it later. But surveys as a process is a descriptive study. You select a group of items or objects or subjects and study their parameters. This is a survey. The census is a whole population survey. It's a survey. I am studying the parameters of a population. So surveys, case studies, and case series are descriptive. While cross-sectional, listen to me, cross-sectional comparative, because we can have a cross-sectional survey.
Yes, so survey could be both of them.
Okay.
It could be comparative or descriptive.
لا انا ما قلت كده.
يعني انا قصدي يا دكتور يعني هو tool ممكن.
دقيقة عشان ما we don't mix things up. هنا
how you are going to apply.
Comparative are cross-sectional comparative.
Yes.
If I do a survey at a certain point in time, it is also cross-sectional. ولكنها cross-sectional descriptive.
Descriptive.
We reserve the term cross-sectional for comparative studies, and I want somebody to explain for me the difference between cross-sectional comparative, case control, cohort, and correlational studies. They're called comparative analytics.
Doctor, can I explain case control first?
I want to ask Sahar and Najla.
Yes.
Pause a little bit so that we give time to other people to interact. Just a pause. Somebody raised their hand. Who is that? Please go ahead. Because I don't see the hand, but I saw it and it disappeared. Who raised their hand? Nobody? Okay.
I raised my hand.
Huh?
I raised my hand.
I'm
also.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about cohort and case control. So
Okay.
for case control, it's something that we go to the past, so we can see what is the factors that appeared. And for cohort, we go to the future. So we have the factors present now, and we go to the future to see the disease or appearance of the disease or not. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. To describe all these four, we need to introduce a couple of terms. These are public health people or community medicine people or epidemiology people. They call whatever affects our health a health determinant, And then the effect of the health determinant, they call it either an outcome or a condition, an outcome. Or so we have a set of health determinants and we have a set of health outcomes or health conditions. The types of health determinants are two. There are negative health determinants. They cause unfavorable outcomes or unfavorable conditions. We call them risk factors. And we have positive health determinant. Exercise is a positive health determinant. It leads to favorable outcomes. So let us use these two terms, a health determinant, or let us call it a risk factor or an exposure to something. Exposure can be exposure to a drug. We give you a drug. This is a health determinant. It cures you. It helps you. It controls your system and so on. So we are addressing these issues. We are addressing the relationship between health determinants and health outcomes. The relationship between, we are studying.
Can we, Dr. Abdelmam, start from this point, which is a very important point? You need to define your exposure and your outcome. You need to define your risk factor, right?
Now we are classifying. So
yes.
Now we have health determinant and we have health outcomes. What do we mean by cross-sectional study? When we select a group of people or two groups of people, of course, if it is two groups of people, it's a comparative study, isn't it? It's a comparative study. So one group is exposed to a health determinant and they have the outcome, or they do not have the outcome. And one group is not exposed to the health determinant and they might have the outcome or not have the outcome. So health determinant and outcome. If we start our study and we don't know who has the outcome and who is exposed, we don't know neither. This is a cross-sectional comparative study. If you start your study and you don't know, you selected the sample, you don't know in this sample who has the exposure and who has the outcome. I don't know, but I study them to determine. So I take subject number one and I check for the existence of the exposure and the existence of the outcome. Then I classify this person. This person is in this group. He is exposed and he has the outcome. This is one. Then I take another one. I find that he exposed and with the outcome. Then this belongs to the same group, and so on, until I classify all the sample into 4 groups. One group exposed and has the outcome, One group exposed but do not have the outcome. One group not exposed but have the outcome. And one group, they are not exposed and they do not have the outcome. And I make a 2x2 table and I analyze that table and I come with the conclusion. This is called cross-section. Case control, I select a group of individuals which already have the outcome, already have the clinical condition. And another group that they do not have the clinical condition or the outcome. I select cases and I select controls. Then I go back to memory or the record. I go back to memory or the record to check for the presence of the exposure. I go and check record or from memory or just by asking. For example, the typical example used is diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So the control, the outcome is cardiovascular disease. And the exposure is diabetes. I want to study whether diabetes will cause or is associated with cardiovascular problems or not. So I take cases, people with cardiovascular disease, and I take other people that do not have the cardiovascular disease. And then I go either the memory or the record and ask those with the disease to check whether they also have diabetes or not. And then I go to the other group, which they do not have cardiovascular disease, and check whether they have diabetes or not. I expect people with cardiovascular disease, more of them will have diabetes because association between diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So this is case control. When you start your study, you select a group of cases and a group of control, and you go back. You go retrospectively. Cohort, you start with a group who are exposed to the health determinant, and another group of people who are not exposed to the health determinant, and I follow them in time. I go prospectively and to measure whether they will develop the outcome or not. Now, this is a cohort study. The same, if I take a group of people with diabetes and people without diabetes and follow them up and see how many of these are going to develop cardiovascular disease and how many of these are going to develop cardiovascular disease, and then I establish the association. So this is the third type. The first type, I don't know the exposure and outcome. The second, I know the outcome, but I don't know the exposure. The third one, I know the exposure, but I don't know the outcome. This is cohort. So cross-sectional, case control, and cohort. What about correlational stuff? Here I correlate things that are not directly, that might not be directly associated. For example, I come to UAE, I study the per capita consumption of meat. Do they eat a lot of meat? What is the per capita consumption of meat? And then I study in them colonic cancer. And I study this in Sudan, in Egypt, in Oman, Sultanate of Oman. And then I compare the results across these countries. If I find it, generally speaking, in all of them, the high per capita consumption of meat is related or associated with colonic cancer. This is called the correlational study. It's a comparative, but I am comparing across populations. So these are the four types of observational comparative studies. I will flash
the most famous cohort study design is Framingham study. Framingham study is the most common, and it is a study that goes forward for more than 20 years. How did they study this? This is about the heart and hypertension. They were studying the risk factors and hypertension and the disease. They choose the population based on the risk factors. Then they are following this population for more than 20 years. This is a prospective study. This is example, yeah, doctor, for what you said, just to give an example for this. So if you choose your topic, you choose a topic, you need to identify where is your risk factor and where is your disease or outcome. Maybe as Dr. Abdelmenem mentioned, diabetes, and you said, yeah, Dr. Abdelmenem, diabetes and it was ischemic heart disease or what? So maybe the disease could be a risk factor. So you need to know the direction of your study, whether it is prospective or you are going back, forward, back. forward back in data. Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Abdelmanem, thank you very much. You have explained the things very nicely, and I could understand it very nicely. Now we know the cross-sectional, we know the case control, and we know the cohort study, and you explained it very nicely, and those all fall under analytical study or comparative study.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ria. Now, the last, we finished with those, but all of them usually studying the association between a health determinant and an outcome or clinical condition. What about experimental studies? We already mentioned that experimental studies include laboratory, field, and clinical. Laboratory, field, and clinical. You can experiment in the laboratory, but you can also experiment in the field, and you can also experiment in clinical. And when you experiment in the clinical setting, they are called clinical trials. They are called clinical trials. Actually, even in the field, they are considered interventions. They are interventions, but they are field interventions. Preventive interventional studies include action research to study the effect of positive health determinants. I mentioned exercise, smoking cessation. There are many preventive interventions applied to the field, and they study their effect. While clinical trials, by the way, you know, clinical trials about drugs in particular include a part which is experimental, laboratory experimentation. And then we have got a clinical interventional part. And this is what a clinical trial will look like. You start with the preclinical laboratory studies for several years to provide information on dosing, toxicity, cost. They call them the 3 pillars of clinical trials, which are efficacy, safety, and cost. Efficacy, safety, and cost. So you start by providing information about the toxicity, the dose, etc., preclinical. Then you start with phase 1, mainly addressing the issue of safety. Are they safe to use in human? The duration is, these are usually done on volunteers. The volunteers, although they are called volunteers, but they are often paid. They are paid to gather information about how a drug interacts with the human body and does it cause side effects or whatever. So it's a safety issue, but also addressing the effect, how efficacious it is. Then they move into phase 2. It's about safety, but it's also about the dose. How big is the dose? There's are evaluating the safety, but the side effects and which dose works best to check effectively what is efficacy. Then you move to step 3 or phase 3. The duration is also several years. This is phase 2 is on a selection of volunteers, patients. While phase 1 may be on healthy people, they are just testing the drug. While phase 2 is on real patients, but also volunteers. They will tell them, we already tested this in volunteers. It is safe, it is efficacious, but we need to test it on real patients. So it's also a small group of people, but for several months only. Then another phase, which is to confirm the effectiveness and monitor safety on a larger selection of people. And then phase 4 is following it up for years and years to confirm the issues of it is post-marketing safety and efficacy. So these are the steps of clinical trials. This is not the classification. It's not the classification. When we classify them, however, if there is an experimental group, we are giving a drug, we are doing surgery for one group, and no control group, it is just a clinical trial. It is just a clinical trial. We are trying this and see the effect. If an experimental group and a control group, it is a controlled clinical trial, CCT. If the subjects are randomly assigned to the groups, it's a randomized controlled or a randomized clinical trial, RCT. And this is, by the way, is the best type of intervention, the randomized control. We don't want to go into the detail, but this is considered the best type of research. And in the clinical trials, it is the best type of clinical trial when it is randomized and controlled. Now, if randomization is not proper, and you need to know about proper randomization, it is called a quasi-randomized control trial. It's not ما مثل ابوك لكن بربيك يعني هو ما مثل ابوك لكن بربيك فهو it's a quasi randomized control trial. Now these are the 4 types of clinical trial.
Dr. Abdelmanem, just to follow you better, I mean, let us say these are all prospective studies, could be the experimental to be a retrospective at any time, or it's all should be a prospective. The same thing, doctor, when you have talked about cross-sectional and cohort and case control, is it, I know some of them could be a retrospective, like case control, maybe you know the outcome, health outcome, and you go backward to see if there was to assess or evaluate the determinant or the health, issue or exposure. So if we want to describe this, is it prospective or retrospective? Can be the experimental at any time to be a retrospective study, or it is all of them is a prospective studies?
Thank you very much. To call it a trial, it has to be prospective. I'm trying something and seeing the effect of it. But you can have a retrospective clinical trial by looking, you know, the exact time, the exact characteristics of the sample, but you know that they introduced this drug a long time ago. We have all the records, so we can dig out these records and look at what happened. What happened, not what is going to happen. This is called a retrospective trial. We don't go back in time collecting data backwards, but we go in time and collecting data forward. We follow the patient from a particular point when the drug was introduced or when the intervention was introduced, and from the records, if the records are accurate, then we can look at the record from the time of intervention forward. So it's a retrospective in the sense that data is already collected before we actually implemented the study. It's retrospective. It can be, but the most appropriate is the prospective clinical trial. Okay, the second issue, by the way, just to remind you, not to lose track, this is the step following the selection of the study design. Remember, we said you select a topic, make a question, hypothesis, finish with the writing of the objective. Then you go ahead and select a suitable study design. Then you make decisions related to populations and sampling issues. First of all, we need to define what a population is. So a population is a group of individuals or items of a study sharing at least a single attribute of interest. So diabetic children is a population. When I said at least single attribute, these share not only being diabetic, but also being children. So at least one single common attribute between the individuals. This is called a population. The inhabitants of Dubai. Anybody living in Dubai, these are a population. What is the shared characteristic or attribute? That they are in fact living in Dubai. But if I say males living in Dubai, I want to study them. So they have two common characteristics, being male and living in Dubai. So a population is a group of individuals or items, because I can say pharmacies. I want to study pharmacies, the pharmacy, or the health center. These are items or elements I want to study. What do they share? They share being health centers. But what else do they share? They share health centers in Sharjah. They share the location and they share the being. What are they? So this is a population. A sample, on the other hand, is a representative subset of this population of interest. And when I select a representative sample or a sample representing this population, we call it a sample. By the way, characteristics of a sample are called statistics. The individual is a statistic, and the total is statistics. When we generalize this to the population from which the sample was drawn, we call it a parameter. We call it a parameter. Age of the sample is a statistic, while when we generalize to the population, it's a parameter. It's a population parameter. It's an indicator. So a sample is a representative subset of the population, and there are two types of sampling techniques. How do we sample? How do we take a sample? We either take a probability sample, which is called also a random sample. And random sampling, we have simple random, systematic sample, stratified sample, sampling, and cluster sampling. They are all random. The first is simple random. Then we have the systematic, which is also random and also uses simple random. And the stratified, which is also random and it uses simple random selection. And the cluster is also random sampling, and it applies at the end of it, it applies simple random selection. So what is simple, what is systematic? Very quickly, we don't want to go into detail. What is simple and how? What is systematic and how? What is stratified and how? And what is cluster and how? Very briefly and quickly. Unmute and say what you want to say, please. What is simple random selection? What is simple random selection? While you are at it, what is a sampling frame or a population frame? Sampling frame. Okay. If I have a sampling framework, it's a list of the individuals or items in a population. So I need to have a sampling frame. I cannot select a sample unless I know who is who. So I need a list of the sample of the population from which I'm going to draw the sample. And that list can be coded. It's better to be coded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So when it tells me 7 is selected, I know who 7 is. So if I have the sampling frame, and then I use a random numbers table or a computer software to select a sample from this sampling frame, then this is simple. Simple means, and it means scientifically speaking, every individual in the sampling frame have an equal chance of being selected. Each one has got an equal chance of being selected. This is simple random selection. If I say I'm going to select from the sampling frame, I'm going to start from the quarter and then move down and select each 7th individual in the sampling frame. This is systematic. I'm going systematically. I'm not going simple randomization. Why is this random? Because the starting point is random, but then and also the chance of being selected is random, but it is systematic random. This is systematic random. If I'm going to select or to pick the X is the 7th or the 8th or the 10th or whatever. Then there is stratified sample. I say I want to study children with diabetes living in Dubai. Female diabetics living in Dubai. Female children with diabetes living in Dubai. How am I going to do that? Because living in Dubai, I cannot access. And this is why there is something called the accessible population. The population that I can actually access. I cannot access all people in Dubai. I'm going to select a sample first. Then from the sample, I'm going to select a number of males and females equally or whatever. And then from the males, I'm going to select age groups like this and that. I'm going to stratify the characteristics and then selecting them in sequence. First, I'm going to select only the males, and from the males, I'm going to select the old, and then from the old, I'm going to select whatever, stratified sample. What about cluster sample? I'm going to say, I'm going to specify geographic regions first, and randomly select 3 of these geographic regions. And then in each region, I'm going to make a sampling frame of schools. And I'm going to randomly select for 2 schools from each region that I already selected. Then from each school, I am going to randomly select 30 students. So this is called cluster sample. So simple, they are all random sampling. They're simple, computer generated, systematic, each number of individuals, stratified. I select from each stratum, and then I cluster them geographically, usually geographically. So this is simple, systematic, stratified, and cluster. The non-probability, the most commonly and widely used is the convenience sampling. I say, well, I cannot study all the students in UAE. I am only going to study the accessible population in Dubai. So I already said Dubai, I already said I'm going to go for those who have records. Those who do not have records, well, this is going to be very difficult. I'm not going to do that. So this is non-probability. It is weaker than the random sample. Also judgmental. I know these people, I can select from them. This is called purposive because I need highly educated people. I know people living in that particular area are highly educated. This is called, it is not just convenience, it is judgmental or purpose. And then there is quota sampling. I'm going to specify a particular quota for each either group or geographic location or so. So it's a quota sampling, it's also non-quite probability sampling. So I just want you to remember, go and read more about the 4 types of probability and the 3 types of non-probability, and there are others. But this is the minimum requirement for you to be able to determine sampling. Now, in clinical trials,
Dr. Abdulmanan, we are going to revisit this slide again when we talk about material and method later, inshallah, because I think it is a little bit brief, so we need it over several slides with each one of the sample alone. It's worth it.
Sure. During the session on proposal writing.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. In clinical trials, selection is based on selection criteria. So it is mainly, it might apply random selection, but usually it is based on selection criteria. You can apply random sampling if you have a very large population and you want a representative sample. But usually when you get the sample, you apply selection criteria to select. So it's usually non-probability. You can specify a quota, you can apply convenience, you can be judgmental, but you specify selection criteria. We call them inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. So you need to, at the planning stage, say, I am going to do this or that. Then this is just summary. You have a population which is called the target population, and then the accessible population, which is population that I can access it. And then in the middle, it is not shown in this diagram. You have to determine the sampling frame, which is the list, whether the target or the accessible. And then you take a sample selected with one of the sampling methods. Then the subject or it becomes a research participant or informed. This is just an example. Who do you want to generalize to? Whether theoretical population or the target population. What population can you get access to? This is called the study population or the accessible population. And then the sampling frame is how can you get access to them? You list them. And then who is your study? This is the sample. Now, this is a briefing, non-probability and probability. There is one here in the diagram, which is called the snowball sampling. Just briefly, snowball sampling, I select, for example, I use judgmental purposes or purposes sampling. Then I tell them to identify others that are like them. And on a purpose, how convenience, I am going to select the students studying in Dubai Medical College. But I'm going to tell the students in Dubai Medical College to recruit students similar to them. This is called snowball sampling, snowball sampling. Okay, this is what you need to know, the probability and the non-probability sampling. And these are the probabilities that you need to know, the simple random, the cluster, systematic, and the stratified random. Now, there are advantages, I'm not going to read them, but just an example, for each of the methods, they have advantages and disadvantages. Because people might think that non-probability sampling is bad. No, for example, there are 6 advantages of convenience sampling. They have very few rules to follow. They are readily available. They're low cost, easy to do, inexpensive, and you collect the data quickly. So when you use convenience sampling, although it has got disadvantages, but it's not without advantages.
Dr. Abdelmanem, convenience sample is including the experimental animals, for example?
What do you mean?
Yeah, in the lab, we prepare, when we have experimental animals, you are going to target specific, you don't have something general to searching it, or you have no randomization. You are categorizing the animals in certain groups and you specify it exactly. So this is considered which type of sampling?
Do we take a sample from experimental animals to apply experimental research?
Yes.
Why do you do that?
What?
Why do you take a sample to represent which population? To generalize what? You are studying biology, you are studying what happens, you are studying what is happening in the
diabetic rats, for example. So we develop the model, diabetic or ulcer or toxicity, and then we start to study. So it is considered which type of sampling. According to this.
Unaware of sampling related to experimental laboratory experimental studies. And I don't know. I don't know whether there is sampling related to selecting animals for experimental studies.
Okay.
Doctor, I think Dr. Yunus wants to share. He raised his hand.
Please.
Thank you, Prof. Abdelmanem. Actually, I was saying before, because you covered the convenience sampling, which I was very, very interested in, because at some point, big discussions in the research community about the representative, non-representative of the populations, why you are using, because at some point when you are doing such a design, you have to justify the method of sampling.
You have to talk to the critics. Yes, I know.
Yes. And my I mean, you covered that very well. So thank you very much. This is really, really gold for me. But my question would be maybe about the bias, because when you chose a certain method of sampling, you chose your methodology and everything. You should be careful about the bias that come later when you are doing the data collection, right? So I just wanted, if you can say something about that.
I hope you are going to continue with us for the remaining sessions, because half of the third session is about the risk of bias.
Yeah, I will definitely be there. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you.
And I want to refer you to the first slide of this presentation. Keep an open mind and be ready to be skeptical, and also to accept other people being skeptical. Keep an open mind. This was the first slide I put in this presentation.
For sure. Thank you very much again. Thanks, Prof.
How do we calculate the sample size? This is a very let me say it's a quicksand. It's a quicksand. Yani going into it is not very complicated, by the way. It's straightforward. Epidemiologists and public health physicians know it very well. But how do we calculate the sample size? Yalla.
There is a specific equation. Actually, I'm waiting for this point from you, because I went through this. I asked many expert people about this. Always it makes a problem for me. So please tell us in details, because this is really, really important and critical.
This is why I called it a quicksand. Okay, what do you need to know before you are able to calculate the sample size? You need to know a few concepts and actually to accept a few subjective ways of addressing this. There are certain subjective ways of addressing this. First of all, you need to know the population size, but we need to know it for a particular type of research. You need to know the level of confidence, the statistical power, and estimates of prevalence and exposure and effect. These are 4 issues you need to know and know about before you are able to calculate the sample size. Population size is straightforward. Like, what is level of confidence? Yes, what is level of confidence?
You specify, I think, according to this, target population, that you need to have a high % of accuracy. Some people choose it to be including 95% of the population.
Level of confidence.
So yes, Sahar. Yes,
maybe to how extent you are confident in your data, and it's related to the error. How there are levels to the confidence. So how the percentage of error.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Others, have you understood what Dr. Sahar just said? And also, somebody mentioned accuracy. I want this to be more clearer than this. What is level of confidence? Let us get rid of population size. The population size, you only need to know the population size when you conduct population studies. احنا قسمنا الستاديز لبيوميديكال, population, and health policy. Usually you need the population size if it's a population study, or they call it proportion study. This is we will see it in the software, but this is what you need. This is all you need to know. You only need population size for population studies. You rarely need population size for experimental or clinical data. You don't. For biomedical studies, you don't usually need population size, because it is mainly based on estimates. Mainly based on estimates. But let us see, you also need to decide a level of confidence, which is how confident the researcher would like to be when they report the findings. When you say the IQ of students of DMCG is 104. How confident you would like to be when you say this, when you report your findings? If you want to be 95% confident, then the level of confidence or the confidence level is 95%. Your confidence, you are not 100% sure, but you are 95% sure that this result is near to the truth. 95%. So you need to determine, and you have to be, this level of confidence have to be high. Why is that? First, let me report it related to the null hypothesis. If I say I am conducting a clinical trial, I want to check whether the new drug, which is drug B, is better than drug A. I want to conduct a trial. My null hypothesis, no, it is not. No, it is not. My alternative hypothesis, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So the ability to accept the null hypothesis, which is no, it is not. This is 95%. This is the level of confidence. The ability to accept the null. Why the ability to accept the null hypothesis should be high? Because it has got consequences if it is false positive. If you say the null hypothesis is true when it is not true, there is a problem. Okay, if فعلا drug B is not better than drug A, and you reported falsely that it is, you couldn't reject the null hypothesis, and you started using this new drug, although the results are false. This is a result. This is why you need a high level of confidence in relation to the level of confidence, in relation to the level. And by the way, to prove the presence of a difference when one exists, the ability to prove the presence of a difference when one exists. This is the level of confidence. Failure to do this is called type 1 error. When you reject the null hypothesis, when it is true, this is type 1 or type A error, or it's also called false positive. And here, failure to prove the presence of a difference when one exists.
So the degree of accuracy is increased when you have higher level of confidence.
Yes.
This is the conclusion, I think, of this. Huh?
Yes. Yes. And you better start from 95 and go up. You can
and this increase by increasing the number of the sample or population under study.
This is why I am talking about it.
Yes.
The larger the level of confidence, the larger sample size you need to take. If you say I want to be 95% confidence, then you take a sample. If you want to be 80% confident, you take a smaller sample. You take a small, no problem. So saying that drug B is better than drug A when in fact it is not is a disaster. This is why the level of confidence should be high, and type 1 error should be low, 5% or less. Okay, you also need to decide a statistical power for the study. Statistical power is the probability that the study will detect a relationship when a relationship is in fact existing. You would like to reject the null hypothesis. You would like to reject the null hypothesis. So that one, the failure to prove the null hypothesis will give me type 1 error. Here, the failure to reject the null hypothesis is type 2 error. Failure to reject the null hypothesis when it is true that there is no difference or association is type 2 error, false negative. طيب خلينا نقول drug A و drug, let us say the example drug B and drug A. Drug B is in fact, there is no difference between drug A and drug B, and you said there is no difference, and you failed to reject this. Then this is type 2 error. This is type 2. But it doesn't have consequences because, okay, I'm not going to change drug B since drug B is not better. I'm not going to change the drug. Even if there is a difference, I fail to detect it, but I am not going to go ahead and I will need more studies. So there is no disaster. The only disaster is that I'm going to delay the use of this new drug. So this is why the statistical power is usually adjusted or selected as being 80%. This is recommended. And type 2 error is in fact 20% or 0.2. So it is acceptable to have a higher. It is usual to accept a higher type 2 error because it doesn't have a dire or a grave consequence. Now, 80% power is usually used, but 95% confidence level is usually used. As Dr. Naila mentioned, sampling, statistical sample size, all these issues we need to revisit. This is just an outline. In association studies, a researcher needs an estimate. And this is in addition to the sample size, in addition to the power level, statistical power, we also need to have estimates. Estimates are, because this is subjective, but is important. You cannot calculate a sample size unless you know estimates for exposure or expected effect and outcome. We will demonstrate that with the software, and I will give you the chance later to experiment with the software that will calculate for you the sample size. But this is the conclusion. You can either accept the real hypothesis, which is
Dr. Abdulmanem, is there, I think, online already made calculators for sample?
Yes.
This may facilitate, because sometimes most of the time actually we don't know the background of the equation, but we just calculated like this.
This is why I introduced the concept first.
Yes, yes, true. Which is very, very difficult and needs concentration actually.
Let me go. I'll just go through that very quickly. This is just a cartoon. Type 1 error when you tell a man, an old one, that you are pregnant. This is false positive. And if you tell this young lady with obvious pregnancy that you are not pregnant, this is type 2 error. Now, this is the software, and this is where you can find it, openepi.com. And very quickly, because it is already 12 o'clock, I might need a couple of minutes to just finish up, but very quickly, I'm going to, you can go to this software, but as I will demonstrate to you, you need the pieces of information I just told you about. So if you go to the list on the left side, there is sample size. When you click on that, there are proportion. I told these are population studies, unmatched case control, and the cohort and randomized control trial, and the mean difference. So these are the four. Let us go to population. I told you that you need the population size for population studies, and this is, you look at the calculator. The first thing it asks from you is the population size, but it also asks you about anticipated frequency. So you need to have some background information about what you are talking about, so that you can give an estimate. If you are not sure, keep it at 50-50 chance. And then you need to put the confidence level, which is the probability of type 1 error, which is 5%. If you want to be confident 95%, you put it here as a 5. Forget about this design effect. So you do that, and then you say calculate, and it will give you the sample size, and it is there. If you select the other one, which is the sample size, unmatched cost control, unmatched case control, what is required from you? You need the confidence level, which is 95 by default. Then you need the power, which is the chance of detecting, which is acceptable to be 80%. Then how many of the cases and how many of the controls, and then the percent of controls exposed. This is an estimate. Then you need to fill one of the following, the odds ratio or the percent of cases with exposure, which is also an estimate, and then you press calculate. I'm not going to discuss it in detail. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there is a ready-made calculator that you can use, and it's very useful. But before you can use it, you need to understand these terms, and these terms we just finished explaining. Because I need a couple of minutes, excuse me if I'm going to go beyond the allocated time. But these 2 or 3 slides are very important just to wrap up. What about the variables? This is also another quicksand. You need to keep an open mind. I'm going to express my own understanding, and you are free to accept it or address it in the way you want. When we say a variable, it is based on the study design. You need to specify the aspects that need to be studied. What do you need to study? The variables. And they're called variables because for any item, they are different. The age of an individual for individual 1 is that much, for individual 2 is that much. So they are called variables. So you need to determine the variables, the issues, the aspects you need to collect data about. It's an attribute of an object, an item, an element, or a subject of the study. Now, a variable is a characteristic that can be measured and that can assume different values. That معنى variable. Height, age, income, place of birth, grades, occupation are all examples of variables. While the information collected about these variables is data. And I'm about data, I'm talking about the information collected.
Doctor, we collect data and convert them into variables, into different variables after collection of the whole data related to the work.
How do you collect
We are introducing them as different variables. Some of them are string or text, some are numbers, and some are dates or age. And it will be subdivided, and some of them will be dependent variables and some will be independent variables according to what you are going to compare. So the data is more collective than variable. Data is the whole info you are collected, and then variables, how you are going to categorize them and then analyze them. Is it true?
No, no. You collect data about variable. You specify variable first.
Before data?
Yes. When you say age is a variable, then the actual values, this is the data. The 75, 33, 24, this is the data. And when you put it in a data sheet, this is called a data set. This is the data set about this variable. This is the data set about this variable. This is the data set. So data is, look at this statement. Variable is the container and data is the content. Variables is the container and data is the content. Income is the variable. 25,000 is data, is the value assigned to that variable. Now, the best place to read about this is called the Scribble, and Scribble is a very good site. When we share with you this presentation, you can just click on this link, and it will take you to a page in which this issue is nicely described. Very nicely described. Types of data, types of variables, etc. I'm not going to read, I'm not going to go into that, but variables and data, we finished with that. So variables, according to parts of the experiment, can be independent or dependent. I expect you know about that. You can manipulate independent data, but dependent data are the result of the manipulation. If you give a drug and people become better, the drug itself, which drug is independent, but the result of the drug is dependent variable. And so According to the data collected, variables can be quantitative or qualitative. According to the data collected. Am I going to collect numbers or values or counts? And so on. I'm going to collect names or ranks or what? So it can be quantitative or the data can be quantitative or qualitative. Now, data can be numerical or categorical. Numerical, numbers. Categorical, categories. The numerical include discrete categories and continuous include continuous category, continuous data, values. These are discrete values and these are continuous values. Discrete values are usually counts. If I say males, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, I refer to a male, خلاص 5 6. فهنا number of students in the class, this number. These are discrete values because they are counts. But if I say level of glucose or anything that can have different values continuously with decimals and everything, this is called continuous data values, and this is discrete data. There are others. Categorical data include mainly nominal data, names. If I say occupation, dentist, pharmacist, biochemist, or ordinal, first, second, third, high, low, moderate, etc. This is ordinal, primary, secondary, and tertiary, ordinal, while occupation, color of the eyes, all of these are nominal. So we have nominal data and ordinal data. They can be binary or dichotomous. They can accept only two types, only two options. True or false, present or absent, male or female, pass or fail. Although they are nominal, but they are dichotomous. They could be ordinal, but they can be dichotomous. I mean, low or high. First, second, first and last. So they can be dichotomous, binary. And this is just a briefing of what you need to know to start with types of data. Categorical or quantitative, qualitative, and numerical or quantitative, and then continuous data, discrete data, and here under nominal and ordinal. Here غلطانين, normal, it is nominal. And this is further this classification with examples. Nominal and ordinal. With the example. Udiya, discrete, and continuous. These are the examples. You can have a look at them. These are counts. These are values. The continuous are values, while the discrete are counts, numbers. Now, when you come to analyze data, based on your objectives, your variables, your data, and the data to be collected, types of data manipulation, transformation, data correlation, and data analysis. You need to determine that because you need to write it in your proposal. You are going to say, I am going to do cross tabulation. I'm going to do frequency distribution tables. I'm going to do chi-square testing based on the study design, the objectives, the variables, and the data collected. And of course, you know, statistics resulting from these can be descriptive or inferential. And this we are going to address in the third session of our course. Now, a basic knowledge of these various types is helpful when you are writing the proposal. You need to know just background information so that when you say, I'm going to use this or that, you know why is it used and how. Now, in instruments called tools or forms, I wanted to interact, but of course, because we are very late, I have to go straight to one important question we need to address. People are free to leave if they have commitments, but we are going to continue for another, say, 7 minutes. What is the difference between a survey and a questionnaire? This is a very important question. We need to clear it and clarify. Anybody?
Survey is done through questionnaire.
Thank you very much. يعني انت as you summarize. لكن maybe not everybody got what you mean. What do you mean?
A questionnaire could be a method or a tool in order to conduct a survey.
Yes. Yes. So a questionnaire can be used for a survey and can be used for other things. And a survey can utilize the questionnaire, but they can utilize something else.
More work can be done in survey. Like I had example for something like this in parasitology. We had a survey about Echinococcus occurrence in UAE, and it included about 600 samples. And it was not through questionnaire. Actually, it was through performing ELISA technique and then Western blot. So there was no questionnaire at all, but it was a survey work.
Okay, so a survey is a process and questionnaire is a tool. The survey is a process, questionnaire is a tool. Even the process includes the process of data collection and analysis, seeks to obtain information such as opinions, beliefs, attitudes, etc. Is open and closed-ended questions are used, subjective or objective, etc. While the questionnaire is the test used or the tool used or the instrument used. And as you can see there, you can use a survey questionnaire, you can do survey logic, survey distribution, survey data collection and analytics, and other tools other than the questionnaire. So generally speaking, the tools are various data collection tools or instruments. Questionnaire is the most widely used, but interviews and discussions records are also used. You can have an interview and record the discussion in a recorder, in a digital recorder. You can have a checklist and go and visit and just tick and so on. But very important ones are called the data collection forms because you need to design. If you want to collect data from records, you need to specify what sort of variable, what do you want from the record, and then you design your data collection form, and then you give it to someone, you give it to the lab technician and ask them to report in that data collection form or the records in the computer or whatever. So you need a form to use it for data collection. It is not a questionnaire, it's not an interview, it's not a checklist, it's a data collection form. I wanted to ask you for questions, but no time for that because I have 2 more slides. For preparations to make, you need to prepare the data collection tool I just described. You need to prepare. In the first half of the talk, we were talking about what you need to make decisions on. So you need to decide on which data collection tool are going to use. But when you come to preparation, you need to prepare a data collection tool. Get it ready. You can make it on a Microsoft Word and print it out. You can make it through SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, or any type of electronic data collection tool. So you prepare a data collection tool. Then you write a literature review, and then you write a research proposal. These are preparations to make during the planning phase. Now, the first one, I'll just give you a list. We will address this also next session. To review the literature, there is a difference between reviewing the literature and writing a literature review, because there are steps in the process of literature, of reviewing the literature. The first step, you search, you need to know about where do you want to go and how do you use the place for search for literature, how do you save it, how do you manage it. So this is an issue. Also, you need to sort and prioritize the literature. You can read them analytically first, go through them. Then you can evaluative reading. Are they good to include in my research or not? Then you compare across the studies, reach step in conclusions, and then you organize the content of your literature review, and then you write it. And when you write it, you write a critical summary. Don't worry, we will start with this list. We will revisit this list in next week's session. And there is a chapter, we will share it with you about locating and reviewing the literature. It's very helpful. Last but not least, just one slide. This is the main issue next Sunday. And thank you very much for your patience. We are still open for questions if you have very burning ones.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdelmonem. Are you going to keep this presentation in a certain place? We need to return back to it, please.
Yes, Dr. Najla, we will share the recording on the LMS course. It will be available there. You can refer to it at any time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you, Doctor. It is very interesting. And thank you for Dr. Rashad to prepare these things. Just one question I want to ask, is it distributed to all students, all batches that they can attend?
Yes, Dr. Samia, the invitation was sent to all the batches, and all the batches are also included in the LMS course. So if they didn't attend, they have a chance to see the recording.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's really excellent.
Dr. Rasha.
Yes, Dr.
Rasha.
Yes, I'm here.
Did you include the DHL in the invitation?
Yes, Doctor. All the clinical faculty member, whether part-time or full-time, and all the students in all the different batches. And also invitation was open for external participants.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Abdelmonem. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Abdelmonem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdelmonem. Thank you, everyone who gave the life to our session and made it a successful, engaging session. We just want to bring to your notice that, inshallah, the second session will be on the same time next Friday, and it will be face-to-face session where we have hand-on experience on how to write a research proposal.
Sunday or Friday?
Thank you. It was a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. See you later, inshallah.
Dr. Rasha, you mentioned it's going to be Friday face-to-face next week?
No, Doctor, it's in the same time. We shared earlier, same Sunday.
You said Friday. You didn't notice what you said Friday. It is
same time, Sunday, next Sunday, inshallah, at the same time, face-to-face, where you have hand-on exposure to research proposal and writing grant also. Both will be discussed in the same session. Same as today, next week.
But
so there will not be any online session in the same day?
We will open the online session also for who cannot attend or they are away from Dubai. We understand that it's a weekend, so we'll share it also online.
We advise you to come because it's a practical session and there is discussion and all of that. We advise you to come rather than attend through Zoom.
So it's going to be in the university?
Is there a place to accommodate many people?
Yes, Doctor, we'll make it in the round hall. We'll make sure that
the round hall. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.